I am so thrilled today to have Empress Trash with me here, and we are chatting about all sorts of things. And there are some really big things coming up for Empress Trash that I'm excited for them to talk about. There is so much activity that we both have been like tweeting at each other about in the last like few weeks that I'm like just thrilled to be able to finally connect with you. And I'm just really excited that this is our first time chatting. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself if you want, in any way that feels good for you.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Empress Trash. I'm a multi-versatile artist, matriarch of mistakes, uh, all sorts of things. Currently, I'm also the arts writer for one of the arts writers, not the arts writer, for NFT culture. I have been an artist my entire life. I got into crypto art early last year, early 2021, like February, March. And I've been a full-time crypto artist since May 2021. So it was pretty quick turnaround for me to like be able to just be full-time all of this. Before I was a crypto artist, I did a lot of different things in the art world, in and out of the art world. I have I originally went to art school in Minneapolis and I dropped out like right after high school. I spent my 20s like mulling about doing whatever. I got my BFA from the University of Iowa in painting, drawing, and animation and design
Mm.
in my late 30s. I graduated in 2014 with my BFA. Shortly after that, like immediately after graduation, I moved out to the Bay Area. There, I worked with as an assistant for a lot of different artists. I worked on a lot of major shows. I like helped on Ai Weiwei's show on Alcatraz. I
Oh,
was in the
wow.
Firehouse Art Collective, which you're probably familiar with being in Berkeley. And
Yeah,
I
definitely.
did
And
a
I
lot
got to
of
see
like
that Ai
stuff
Weiwei
with
show
Tom
also
Cruise.
too.
Yeah, that I worked on the prisoners of conscience that were like the Lego portraits. That's what I
Right.
worked on
Oh,
that show.
wow.
And
Okay.
that was a wild experience in and of itself. It was just like a quick tangent. We got to ride out with the Rangers in the morning, and then we got put in the area to like assemble these Lego portraits. However, we couldn't make any noise because there was birds like roosting outside,
Oh
and
my
if any noise
goodness.
was made, it like messed them up. And we were in the old area that was like the prison workshop where people had to go to like work things. So we were like sweating in this big old room assembling Lego portraits, not able to talk. And I was like, man, this is like being in prison, kind of like we're escorted by the Rangers out here. We leave with the Rangers. So I don't know. It was like a one level of that like I don't know, like unless you were like working on it, like you didn't really get that experience, but
Right.
it was awesome. It was really great. And like my fingers hurt from like all the like
The
like
little
putting
minutia,
Legos.
yeah,
Yeah.
thousands of Legos.
Yeah, thousands. And yeah, that was a great one. But yeah, then I was in the Firehouse Art Collective for a while. I did a lot of stuff I like collaborated with Tom Franco at one point. He actually owns that piece that's sitting in his in his garage, I'm pretty sure. Like he has a garage that's just like art. And then I was happy there, but then at one point I was like, I kind of feel like I'm one of Tom's artists. I'm not my own person.
Right.
And not that anything against him, but I ended up like stepping away from the collective just to like find my own footing. And at that point, I was living in a punk house in West Oakland and I started running shows out of the house. So we were running like art shows and also punk shows and music shows. We would have noise music, all that type of stuff. And we also would run fundraisers for people. So we run fundraiser for Punks with Lunch, which is an organization in West Oakland that served the houseless encampment right by my house, which I worked with outside of that fundraiser. Also for Bay Area Worker Support, which is a mutual aid fund for sex workers run by sex workers. And we had actually a failed film festival in our backyard
I love
where
that.
we had films shown by sex workers, made by sex workers,
So
films about
rad.
sex work made by sex workers. Yeah, but all of that stopped with COVID. Obviously, like we weren't going to be irresponsible and keep doing stuff, even though, man, if we would have ran shows during COVID, people would have came
Oh,
because
I'm
everyone
sure.
was crazy to get out, but we weren't gonna we weren't gonna be irresponsible like that.
Right.
And so I actually was making a full, like I was for after I left the Firehouse Collective, like I was a barista part-time, but then once we started running the events, I was able to make a living off of like my art completely. And COVID shutting down all the events, like that, like I couldn't do anything. So one when that happened, I actually got a mutual aid fund in Oakland that was for artists that were affected by COVID. And that helped me for like a couple months while I looked for a job. And I got a job actually at, I'm not going to say where still, I'm not going to say where, but I
Mhm.
was an art appraiser for a major company and I would appraise and authenticate art. That was miserable because it was a warehouse, it was an overglorified warehouse job. While I was there, like it was cool because I was getting to like handle all this art. I was like appraising pieces that were like $10,000 to $100,000. But then I was making like $25 an hour, and then I'd go home and see the poverty right in front of me, like in West Oakland of a houseless encampment. So it'd be like I
Right.
went from like ultra rich to like my poor neighborhood, and it was making me angry, needless to say. And at one point, I think about like 6, 7 months in, one of my coworkers was like, "Have you heard about NFTs?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" And she's like, "Well, do you know crypto?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I know crypto." And she's like, "Well, NFTs, da 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 da." And she explained it briefly. And that weekend, I went home and I researched it, and I'm like, "This is it. This is everything I've been looking for."
Wow.
And I like researched it a little bit more. I like rekindled my Twitter, figuring out like, oh, I need to be on Twitter. Like I never was on Twitter before that. I thought Twitter was kind of toxic. I still think Twitter's kind of toxic, but it's a lot
Totally.
better than probably it used to be. And yeah, in February, I think I put my first piece up on OpenSea. I was completely ignored. It was really cool. I got really mad. I actually like didn't like do anything for a couple weeks. And then I'm like, you know what? You're being a baby. Like, of course no one's gonna pay attention to you. Like you literally just restarted your Twitter and you need to like get it together. Like, you have to like talk to people and stuff. And about a week into me being a baby, so it was like 2 weeks I didn't really do much. I started just like watching how successful artists did it. And then I started like kind of, not pretending or anything, but I just started kind of emulating a little bit of what they did, but also like keeping it real to me. And on my birthday, like 2 days before my birthday that year, which is March 23rd, I sold my first NFT. And I was like, what? I mean, I cried like more than once, but
I
and
love that it was on your
from there,
birthday.
yeah, it was 2 days before, but it still was like I had a goal of selling one before my birthday, and I did it, and I was like so happy. And after that, like so much crazy stuff has happened, like so much in like that year and a half now. I mean, like my work has been internationally exhibited. My work has been at South by Southwest. It was at the TED Talk conferences, sold a lot of work. I've helped a lot of other artists too. I've collected an insane amount of work on Tezos. I think I have over 2,000 pieces that I've collected on
Wow.
there. I don't know. I haven't looked in a while. And I've, yeah, and eventually everything that's happened has happened. If anyone who follows me, they know everything that's happened. So
That's so
really, like, I think
amazing.
I've done more in the last year and a half in the crypto art space than the rest of my career combined in art.
Oh.
Even with like, yeah. Yeah. So I love it.
That's so incredible. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing your story and your journey in getting to this place. And it's so interesting that, you and I've talked about how we're both, well, I'm in the Bay right now, you're not in the Bay anymore, and how we didn't intersect while you were in the Bay. And now that you're not here, we're talking. And I find it really interesting that we, like many folks, have found each other through the crypto space and have started to like support each other and collect each other and uplift each other, and like you were sharing, be inspired by each other too. And I think one thing that, I find really
Mhm.
interesting that I'd love to hear you talk about, because you have brought it up a little bit already, is like these hierarchies of like value, these hierarchies of meaning, even that exists within the traditional art world and the crypto art world. I think that you being someone who has existed in those spaces, like I really love your ethos of like failure and trash and like uplifting, um and also like like in a way like kind of reorganizing some of these hierarchies, and would love to
Yeah.
hear you share about that.
Um it's one of my favorite subjects. Like, okay, full disclosure, like I've been in BDSM lifestyle for a long time,
Hmm.
and that is all about like analyzing power structures and being really
Totally.
like really honest about power structures. And I really think like being critical and like looking at power structures around us is like a really important thing for each individual to do. But then also, I think it's super important for artists to do because, and this comes from my schooling at the University of Iowa, like my art history professors there really beat into me. Like, I don't want to necessarily use such violent terminology, but really, really put into me that as an artist, we are the ones who are dictating history, and we are the ones who are creating the propaganda for powers to be, and we are the
Right.
ones who are creating the narrative. And if we hand that power over to just anyone, we're handing over our creative energy, and we're handing over so much. We're literally handing it over. And like I remember learning in art history class, like there was one professor who literally for like half of the semester talked about like propaganda through history, and it wasn't even a propaganda course, it was a general art history course. And like I've always understood the subconscious thing kind of, but that really like put in my eyes, I'm like, oh man, like artists are the ones who are determining all of this.
Right.
And so I feel like a lot of times, especially in the traditional art world, and we see it in the crypto art world too, that people with the money try to dictate what the artists are creating because they want that control over the narrative, and they want the money and their power to be cemented by the art being created. And when an artist says, I don't give a fuck about the money, I don't give a fuck about your power, I'm gonna make the art that I want to make for me. And please excuse my language, but it's literally like the words
Hmm.
in my head. Um, but when an artist does that, that's scary to like a lot of people. And it's ultimately like true empowerment for the artist too. And that was one of the reasons I really got into crypto art, because the thing is it can cut out a lot of these power structures as long as we don't emulate those power structures within the crypto art scene. Which I do see people emulating it at some points by, like it's not wrong to have a gallery and it's not wrong to be a curator, but it's like to me it starts being wrong when like certain people have the immense amount of wealth and then everyone is chasing after them to be able to even get one sale, and then they're creating like art around this person just in hopes to get a sale, not even like being commissioned by the person. That's, and like to me, like that's even worse. Like at least like in the traditional art world, it's like people are commissioning and paying the artist to paint the
Right.
portraits of them. And sometimes, yeah, I see it happening, and it really like I'm like, yo, y'all handing your power away. And it can be really controversial when you're saying that. And it can seem like you're like, it seems sometimes like I'm being very critical of people with money. And in a way I am, but more so I'm being critical of the structures around it and the power dynamics around it. And if someone has those power dynamics so internalized in themselves that it's part of their identity, then that's kind of a problem. And if they think what I'm talking about is a personal attack because they've internalized that power into their ego, then, you know, that's on them. That's not really on me as much. Like, or people who are critical of it. And I think one thing I was thinking about a lot today and yesterday and this week in general actually is how for a lot of my like time in crypto art, like criticism has been pushed back a lot. And I think we're starting to get to a point that the crypto art scene in general is mature enough where we can start criticizing it, and that will help it move forward. It's not in, and I think the criticism needs to come from internally, and I think it needs to come from artists that have been around. And I see it, I see some artists doing it. Like I would call out Stella Bell as someone who's very critical of everything, and she does it in such a genius way, and like I love her to death for it. And I think Rob Ness is another person who's very critical and very loud about it, and it doesn't come across as like toxic and just clout seeking. It's like very much like in critical lens of what is going on around. I think like we're at a point we can start doing that and being critical in a way that isn't just being like toxic or destructive, but you know, constructive criticism of what's going on around us. And I'd like to see more artists in general feel empowered to do that, because I think sometimes an artist gets scared to like say what they're really thinking because they want to play the game, they want to make sure they're not pissing off collectors. But I can say, granted, like my sales are a little low right now because of like the bear market, but overall, me as a crypto artist, every time I have spoken out and been critical and put my neck out like that, I've actually been rewarded by people who agree with me. And whether it be by getting like interviews or exhibitions or sales at the end of the day, I mean, that's what blatantly like we want to sell our work so we can live and be a happy free artist is, it's blatant. But I think like not being scared to like really look at those power structures and really say what you see, and like but also not being scared when you get criticism back for like saying what you see. Like
Right.
it's a two-way street. And really that's, I mean, like I could break it down even more, but I like more so would like say it's the call to action of like be critical of it. Don't play into old structures. And but also like some things were good in old structures. So just because something was in an old structure doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's really like build the world you want to see around it, and like take the time to be mindful about it, because they're like, why just emulate what we've already been doing, but then also like why throw away the good things from what we've been doing too in the art
Yeah.
world and as artists.
Definitely. Yeah, it's like a balance. It's a, and it's a hard balance to find. And I really appreciate that you're bringing in like these, what I kind of, from my, my own life experience, I see as like punk or DIY values, right? And like feminist values and also queer and trans values that I have really experienced within like different feminist, queer and trans communities and punk communities of believing in the possibility of something different happening, while also at the same time, as you're saying, really criticizing some of these dynamics, some of these power structures, and trying to find solutions, trying to find other ways of existing. And I think one way that I see this showing up in your work, and I love your elevation of trash. I think that that to me is something that I don't see enough in the crypto art space. Like I love
Yeah.
the like ethos that you're bringing in of really really critiquing certain hierarchies of value around aesthetics, because I do see that happening so much within the space that like there are certain like aesthetic things that are elevated or like seen as like the good NFT art or whatever. And you know, you coming in and other artists who I feel like resonate with you coming in and really problematizing that. And to me, that's so important. And just wanted to
It
name
is.
that. And I wanted to hear if you want to share something about like that trash magic that you bring into the space.
Yeah. I skirt around it a lot. I don't know why. Blatantly, like I view it, it's definitely degenerate art part two. And I don't know how to like unpack this without bringing Nazi shit into it, but I'm bringing Nazi shit into it. So, if anyone who has studied like Nazi Germany, one of the huge things that they did was try to control the art. And they deemed some art degenerate because essentially like it wasn't rendered in a traditionally beautiful sense. So a lot of the stuff that was degenerate art was like abstract. I don't know if abstract expressionism was even a thing yet. I think that came a little bit after, but a lot of it was like abstraction and expressionism like separated, and like things where it was exploring form and deconstruction and emotions over just creating like a perfectly rendered form of like a perfect person. And there was something I feel that happened in the art world at that time because of that, where almost like a rift happened between like highly rendered works. And when I say highly rendered works, some people don't understand that. I mean like the things that you look at that are so polished and they look high realism, or like they look like a photograph, or like all of that. And none of this is necessarily a criticism of that work. I have some artists that I love that make work like that because
Definitely.
they still have the ethos behind it. But what it is, I think like a rift kind of happened of like the realism artists were like here, and then the like abstract expressionism type people and like the like Dadaists and people
Right.
like that, like it kind of became their thing. And since then, like I think like the two art things have been like growing separately, but like recognizing each other. But I honestly like, I really think Nazi Germany is the one that caused this rift, because Picasso, if you actually look at his work, he did like high realism and then he did abstraction. And if you actually look at a lot of artists, like they who do abstraction and they can do high realism. I can do high realism. I decided to create the aesthetic that I created because I'm specifically criticizing doing high realism and fetishizing that. And specifically because that's like fetishizing high realism is exactly what Hitler did. And I don't like Hitler. Like I really don't like that at all. Um and I know like he's not alive anymore, but that ethos is still out there. It's generate, you know, it's a few generations later, but it's still there of like fetishizing highly rendered things as being more valuable than like something that is maybe like more emotional or conceptual, or pushing boundaries of like what aesthetic should be, or what is even questioning what is beauty. And I think more in recent times, so that like kind of stemmed me like thinking about that a long time ago. But
Hmm.
then I started getting into like adbusters type stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I am, yeah.
But they and yeah, they like are very anti-corporate, very like questioning like corporate propaganda, which we call commercials, but it is corporate propaganda to perpetuate their ideas. Then I started like in like my 20s, I really started unpacking like the corporate propaganda. And then also like as I went into art school, like I learned that more. And yes, I learned how to paint realistically, and actually, like my BFA show was a portrait of myself that I did. Like we had to do a self portrait, but then I deconstructed it and then reassembled it as a quilt. And actually, the quilt was what was a quilt I was raped on as a child. Heavy, super content warning.
Wow.
Sorry, I should have said that first. But that was actually the start of me doing like conceptual abstraction art, because up until that point I was getting through art school. I was like, I'm going to do what I want when I want. But then when they were like, or I'm going to do what I need to do to get through art school. And then when they gave me my BFA show and they're like, okay, do whatever you want, no rules, we don't care, doesn't have to be what, just whatever you want. I started deconstructing all of that, like literally taking the realistic paintings I did and cutting them up and reassembling them. That was one that I did. Another was all of my like, so when you're in painting school, like you have to do like a whole bunch of studies of other artists' work, and I literally cut them all up and put them into a giant quilt. It was like probably like 8 foot by 4 foot, because it's like that's how many paintings you have to do. And you can see like the bits of realism in there, but it was all deconstructed. And that for me was part of the therapy of it. It's like, okay, I learned how to do all this realism, but I'm literally very physically deconstructing all of these paintings, i.e., deconstructing all the knowledge that was put into me.
Right.
So then I can start creating my own, not ethos, visual language, like aesthetic. That's the word I'm thinking of. And then from there is when I really started exploring. Like I still would do realism here or there because it's like it's in my head. I've learned how to do it. But I really started exploring like deconstructing things more and more. And when I was in the Bay Area, I actually would do art installations made out of trash. I would still destroy paintings and then reconstruct them. But I started painting like just like topics that were either related to like natural cycles or about incorporating like different found objects or trash in it. And a lot of this was inspired by the home that I moved into, because there was literally like it was a dumping squat ground and there was trash everywhere. And I started just kind of making art out of the trash in the house, because I didn't like some of it, like a lot of it we threw away, but then some of it I'm like, this is really cool. And if I do XYZ, I can make something cool out of it. And it was kind of it's also a transmutation. I think that's like the biggest thing, if anything, from this long ramble, is taking these things that don't have cultural value at all, which is like, low effort art, trash, whatever you want to like glitch art, other things. Well, glitch art's starting to have more and more cultural value. So I don't know if I want to like put that in the like it doesn't have cultural value, but the things that generally like people dismiss as like not great, like the idea of transmuting it and being like, no, this has cultural value. It is like a sort of magic where and like what is it that is valuable in life? And to me, what is valuable is like the real human experience and like the emotions that I'm feeling in here, and freedom, and not being told I have to act a certain way to be like appreciated and loved, and whether that be in my art or be with other people, because it's like at the end of the day, like I know I'm a good person. I know I'm not trying to hurt people around me. I'm not like a sadist or a malicious person. And it's like I think fundamentally that for me, like that's what matters more than anything. And I think like the art that I do is part of like learning how to love myself like that, because I have been called trash a lot and I have been thrown aside a lot in life. And I know what it's like to be on the outside. And I still kind of am like skirting on the outside.
Hmm.
And I think like a lot of it is that, and it's an ultimate like radical form of self-acceptance. It's like you can love yourself, you can love the good parts of yourself, but like the things that other people look at and they're like, I don't know, like that makes you kind of unlovable. because like, you know, maybe because I'm overweight or because I swear a lot or because I'm for a long time I sorry, my dog just like plopped down and shook the
Cute.
world. um what like the things that make me unlovable to other people, their perspective, it's like ultimately like I need to love them and I need to celebrate them. And like it's not that they're only who I am, like there are good parts of me too, but like they need that extra love and they need that elevation more than the good parts of me need that elevation. Like people can like yeah, if I navigate the world and it's like, I'm like, oh, I feed the homeless and I do this and I do that and I'm such a great person. Yeah, people are going to be like, yeah, you're a great person. But it's like, if I like present like the negative sides of myself more, like people are going to reject me. And so that's why, like, I think it's important for me to not reject that because instead of like seeking their validation, like validate myself and then transmute it into the art that I'm creating. I think that explains it. It's a really hard
Yeah.
thing to like wrap around and like really explain because a lot of it is energetic and it's like a lot of it is intangible and there's a lot of the reason is because I create art with it and because it putting words to it can be really difficult for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you shared around like that reclaiming of power, that reclaiming of value. And also, it really reminds me of that, very famous saying of the personal being political. And also, I kind of feel like the personal being collective too, because I feel like as you have reclaimed that for yourself and given it value and cherished it, so many people have also been called to do that too, to also value those sides of themselves that maybe they've been told to not value. And I think that's something that's really exciting that like when you kind of do that yourself, you actually give other people permission to do that too. And for me, the word that I
Yeah.
like have reclaimed is the word mutant. I use the word mutant a lot in like
I
a lot of
love
my
that. I
artwork.
love that.
Yeah,
I love
it's
it.
it's definitely a word that like for me is filled with that energy that you're sharing where it's like it's something that I should be ashamed about to being a freak. It's something I shouldn't like about myself, but actually it's what makes me so valuable and magical and special.
Yeah.
And I think cherishing that, you find other mutants, you find other trash beings who also want to celebrate that too. And I think we're, in a way that going back to what you said at the beginning of this conversation, that is where culture starts to shift, right? That is where things start to change. And I think I'm just like so excited that your voice is in the crypto art space and that in the cultural space in general, and that you are really championing for, different aesthetics, for valuing of things that maybe are not getting the attention that they deserve. And as we know happens all the time, in 5 to 10 years, they're going to be like all the rage because artists are visionaries. Artists are
Yeah.
always living in another dimension and another timeline. And we're always seeing the ways that culture needs to shift, right? Yeah.
Now I want to do a mutant trash collab.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to mutate some trash.
Yes, I love that
And
so much.
also on it, just a quick side note I thought of while you were talking about that is two things are very natural. Mutation is natural. It is how we evolve as like organisms is genetic mutations and trash is natural. We all produce trash. And those two things are so quintessential to like our existence, but like a lot of times we throw them away or demonize them. And I think like both of us, I see it where it's like valuing that helps heal things that may have been going wrong in society in a way. And I do see the ripple effect also myself. Not that it's really hard to articulate it, especially when you start having more and more impact. But it's like when I change something internally, I see it ripple out. I don't even have to say anything. It's like it gets to a point where you just like you do it and you see it happen. You see the world change around you and you just start accepting it. And it helps all of it more. I just really wanted to reinforce that before we move on. Mutation is cool, trash is
Yeah.
cool.
Love this idea of collaborating and fully agree with what you just shared. Yeah, whatever we shift within, I always kind of see it, especially after I've had like really intense like therapy sessions or like healing sessions, and I come out of it and I'm like, I'm in a different dimension now. Like I'm gonna actually like witness like that exactly what you said, that like internal shift
Yeah.
has made me jump into another timeline now and fully have seen that transform and change my life. And and then speaking of this, I am really excited to share with folks what's coming up for you, because I know that you, as you were saying, you've been like elevated more, your work has been celebrated more, and so would love for you to share anything that's coming up that you're excited about, that you want to share with folks who are watching this.
Yeah, my SuperRare drop with
Yay.
NFTgirl. I'm I'm just to talk about that quickly. I like she's been following me for a while, but I actually met NFT girl Lex at South by Southwest, and I'm very particular about who I do video interviews with, first of all. So
Such an
congratulations.
honor.
Yeah. Second of all, um, we met there and she was so grounded and so just she's such a good person. Like I keep saying that, but it's just like she's
Mhm.
so real and so good. And we were at a thing like this like Wranglers meetup for like Austin locals, but we got invited there, both of us and a few other people, because they were like, you're like, you belong, like whatever. And she waited until like the thing died down more, and she came up to me and she's like, hey, do you want to just sit and hang out and talk so I can get to know you? Like, I get like big things aren't really your thing. So like let's just have a one-on-one for a minute. And in all of my going to events, crypto events, I've never had anyone do that. Like
Oh, that's so
ever, like to get to
cool.
know me. Yeah. And it instantly made me be like, I want to work with this person. I don't mind like time. Like I tend to be anti-influencer, like overall. And I tend to be like because of just like my criticism of power dynamics, I tend to
Totally.
be someone who's very like, oh, you have clout, whatever. Like, I don't care. But how real and approachable she was, and how she approached me and really made me feel comfortable being able to be my authentic self with her. I decided to do my first video interview with her, which was for the Joy of NFTs, and it was with my friend Wessel, he's an artist who is based out of LA. I think he's like kind of traveling around now too. We did like I gave her a list of artists to be like, okay, this is who I'd like to do the show with, and she chose Wessel because she felt like our visual styles kind of matched closest. And we did the video interview and we put that out there. And part of it was we started a piece on that interview, and just to explain our processes a little bit. And that piece I've been working on since April now, and is what is being minted. The finished product is what is minted now on SuperRare and is going up for auction on August 30th. And it's based off a word that she took from like user poll, which actually came from Wonder Mundo, who is my best friend. And that word is chaos. When I'm creating art, I tend to like follow a jazz thing and like wander a path. It's like, yeah, there's literal chaos, but then like let me follow the chaos into like
Right.
more chaos. And the piece that I ended up making is a lot about censorship, and it's about self-censorship, and especially around sexuality, being like a queer woman and growing up in a place that I grew up in, not like you could die, like being LGBTQ. Like like people were literally murdered around me for being LGBTQ. And so I learned to like really, and like highly Christian, like the extreme Christian, I really learned to censor like any feelings I had towards not heteronormative stuff. And it still takes me Like, and it took me a long time, but it still takes me a long time to like unpack that and like be okay with like when I have desires towards non men, you know, and like queer being like, I just like, I love women. I love all bodies. I just like, I just think humans are beautiful and I'm attracted to like different energies in people over like necessarily a physical thing.
Same. Yeah.
So, and yeah,
Totally.
yeah. And so the piece is that, and I actually titled it Vanilla. It's a vanilla ice cream cone with tits, and it has lewd over the mammary glands with nipples, which is another play because it's ice cream, mammary. Anyway, like the boobs. And it says hot mess on it because I was thinking a random memory popped up of me of someone giving me like a sundae or a stationery that had like a melting sundae on it that said hot mess. And that's where like the ice cream and hot mess came from. And then I just kept going and like thinking about censorship and like internalizing censorship and like the feeling of like when you self-censor so much, eventually you do explode. Like the feelings have to come out somehow. Like
Right.
no matter how much you try to like push it down, they still come out. And so like yeah, the piece is like all exploring that. And it's also like talking about censorship in general, like on a macro level, because like I know because SuperRare has like my friend who I now consider Trash Family, Rob Ness, like he had his piece delisted for a long time off of SuperRare, the toter. And so I felt it kind of really important that my first piece on the platform be about censorship and energetic exchange of it, because I do like view when I'm into piece of work, it's an energetic exchange. And it's like having a conversation in a way on a visual level, but then on an energetic level. And so my first piece being really about censorship, I felt like it needed to be that conversation with Super on
Right.
an art
Right.
level of just like, you know, like I see what is happening and I this is what's happening with me. I don't want to like I want to have this conversation with you. And it is a criticism, but it's also like it's opening up a conversation about it. And there is a lot of layers to the piece. And it's really chaotic because the word was chaos, and also I'm a very chaotic person. But yeah, that is coming. And I found out the reserve on it's going to be 1.5 ETH. That's what I just found out. It may change. I don't know. That's all NFTgirl because it is her Joy of NFT gallery that it's minted in, and it's specifically for the show. So she wants to, like, she, you know, she's bringing together a vision with that. And I'm so, again, like, I love her so much. It's been like so much of a pleasure to work with her. She is very supportive of all that is going on in here. Even though like she hasn't directly collected from me yet, but I mean all of this is showing a lot of support for like the ethos that I'm bringing, the idea of elevating trash, the idea of radical self-acceptance, the idea of like supporting LGBTQ, supporting sex workers, supporting like a freer world in which people can like express themselves. I mean, her supporting me and minting my Genesis and like interviewing me and all of it, I mean, it shows like a level of support that like money can't like compare to it to me. Like, yes, money's good, but like it's one of those things. Yeah. So I'm so
Oh,
grateful and I love it. And yeah, it is going to production next week.
so
So I'm preview right now.
exciting. Yeah, I'll make
Ah,
sure that I link, both to that interview that you just shared about and also to this piece. So people who are here watching this, they'll be able to see and hopefully even bid on this piece. I am just so, so excited by your voice kind of being platformed in this way and supported. And I also love that as you're naming, like in dialogue, in conversation with these platforms, and using your own positionality to also champion for other folks. And I think that's so inspiring. And I really want that to inspire other people to keep pushing these boundaries so that we don't get a replication of these censorships that we've seen in other areas, and to really support these folks that you named, right? Folks that really do need that platforming, and also that we need to continue our including these folks in conversation, because very easily these corporations don't want people like the folks that you named to be in conversation. So we are going to keep doing what we can to keep using our platforms
Yes.
to support and to bring them in. And it's just been such a joy to connect with you. And I cannot believe this is like our first time actually like speaking in this way, because I feel like we've known each other for so
I
long.
love it.
And yeah,
I do
I,
too.
there,
Wait till we hang out in person someday.
yeah, I can't wait to come visit you. I'm so excited to come visit you. And I'd love for you to share how folks can get in touch with you. If you want to just share, I will be linking it below, but if you want to
Yep.
just share how folks can connect with you.
Twitter is probably the best. Twitter DMs is probably one of the worst. I'm very much, I like public communication. I get weird about DMs unless I've built a level of trust with people. So honestly, it's just best to talk to me on Twitter and like comment on my stuff, or even at me on Twitter. And like, I would say 80% of the time, it's a better return rate when you at me on Twitter, as long as like my notifications aren't completely buried. And also like my website, there's a link on my Twitter to my website. I have a newsletter on there. You can also find me on NFT culture as an arts writer, but there's no way to really
Yeah.
contact me on there. But I also will put out there anyone who, I mean, I would love, of course, to interview you at some point. I have like a list I'm going through of like my wants, like who to interview for NFT culture. But anyone who, feels like they jive with like who I am and what I am and trash in general, and if they're like an LGBTQ, BIPOC, or like any marginalized group in general, women too, like if you really feel like you resonate with me, reach out to me. And like, like if you know someone who would possibly benefit from talking to me, reach out to me, because what I tend to do, I have limited bandwidth to interact with each individual, but I'll help you find people to like connect with if you're feeling
Awesome.
like, kind of separated. I've helped a lot of people. Like I'm very good at connecting with like different groups, or helping you learn how to connect with different groups. That's like, I'm very much like, I want to enable people to like feel like they can build a community around them, because I can't be there for everyone, but I can be there in the sense of teaching you how to build like a thing around you. But yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to me. If I ignore you, it's nothing personal. I'm a very busy person. And I do my best to respond to everyone. But I tend to prioritize the people I just mentioned and sex workers. Um, I am very like, I have limited bandwidth, so it's like who I respond to is like very much based on like me and my identity, and like I want to support people that like share my identity, and it's not anything against people who don't have my identity. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, fully makes sense. And yeah, definitely reach out to Empress Trash. And thank you so much for giving me the honor of having this video interview. You're actually the
Yeah,
first person that I'm interviewing with this new series of interviews that I'm hoping to do. So it's such a beautiful way to start
let's kick it
this. And
off. Great.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I cannot wait for our Mutant Trash collaboration in the future.
We're gonna do it.
Yes.
It may take a minute, but we're gonna do it. I love this idea of mutant trash because it's
Yeah.
like mutant apes. but it's mutant
Yes.
trash and 100 times better.
Yes.
We may just need to do like a mutant tez trash and
Yes, I
get a
would
bunch of
love
people to
that.
make
Yes. Oh my gosh, make it a movement. I love that.
it.
All right, well, take care, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Bye, everyone.
You broke the third wall. They broke the third wall.